Boom. Okay, Tatiana.
Wes.
What up? This is it's only been 3 years.
What in the pandemic is going on? 3 years.
The last time you were up here was, wait, you said it was May?
Yeah, May 2020.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's a celebration. Celebration. Bust the bubbles out.
But I think this is the first time we've ever done a podcast.
Yes.
So I'll give the audience some background. I found you on Instagram, and I remember you put up several posts that were just either hilarious, but they were speaking about like deep spiritual truths, the human condition, psychology, psychospirituality, the spirit realm, spirit world, and a lot of practitioners in that field I steer clear of. Primarily because they're not very grounded or balanced, and I see a lot of spiritual narcissism or manipulation and taking advantage of people with readings, but like you were the real fucking deal and you were awesome, and I could feel your authentic intention, who you were as a healer. So I reached out, and I think we did our first reading on Zoom, and that was amazing.
Actually, I think it was a person. No?
Was it?
It might have been.
Maybe.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, maybe in my old office.
Maybe.
Yeah, because you came to my, before Eternal Strength, you came to my
Cobb office.
Yep, over in East Cobb. So I could give you this huge introduction, but I would love if you just kind of take the floor and give a little bit about your background, who you are, the work that you're doing, and then we can dive in wherever we need.
Okay, cool. My name is Tatiana Skroskis, other known as the Trap Witch. I am a shadow worker. I have a new term that someone gave me, motivational maven.
Cool.
Women in power. And I help people just navigate through the darkness, the stigmas, through their subconscious blockages in order to fulfill their power and their purpose here. It's not something I initially grew up with the gifts activated. It's something that slowly my guides and God dragged me to my own awakening. And so 2017, I launched my practice after a eat, pray, love moment in the underbelly of the Atlanta sex work world. So, that's where
Run it back. Let's do it like reggaeton style.
Yes, because sometimes people think that God comes and talks to you only in the church, but sometimes God comes and talks to people in strip clubs, in the hood, everywhere. God is more accessible than people give, and I think that's what keeps a lot of people away from their own spirituality, their own spiritual practice, and really accessing their God-given gifts and their purpose here. So for me, I always tell people finding my purpose came in the height of my depression, the height of feeling purposeless, because I did go to college. I had a plan. I was a girl with a plan, and what I found out is that in life, a lot of us are not prepared if the plan doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I was a chronic over planner, and spirit and universe, God, whatever you want to call it, has always had a way of saying, fuck your plans. And so I help people too, also with that, understand that if you can get in touch with your own intuition and your own, trust, then life becomes a lot more magical. And a lot more happy in the end. Because sometimes I find also too is people don't recognize that although we want to be happy, sometimes we also have to be strong individuals because it's spiritual warfare out here.
Yeah. And I was just having a conversation with my buddy Christian the other day, and we were talking about it really does feel like spiritual warfare. Fighting for your truth, your alignment with self. And there's a line that I like from this Jason Isbell. He's like a alternative country artist, and he's got a line in a song, and he says, I'm not a good soldier unless I know what I'm fighting for. And I feel like I identify with that. I'm like, man, I don't want to be a soldier. I don't want to be in an army unless you tell me that the fight has intense meaning and purpose, and then I'm a fucking general. Then it's like, okay, if I can stand behind it and fighting for purpose and meaning and truth. And I love when Cornell West talks about it. And he says the whole thing becomes, what are you going to do with this life in this moment in time with what you have gifted to you? What type of person are you going to be? What type of principles, morals, values? How are you going to walk through the fire of growth and existence? And so, like Tatiana, I think you being here represents a lot for me because you have been in the spiritual trenches with several people from all different walks of life, trying to help them align with their truest self, trying to help them find that inner voice that's always been there. But then it's the balance, like you said, of letting go of ego and letting God work through you as a vessel and being open to that plan. And that's hard to do because so many times you can get hung up in, but it should look like this, or my life should flow like this. You think that you have an idea. So take me back to 2017. Like, wait, do you remember it?
I do, but one thing I want to add, you know, when you're talking about being in the trenches, is like, yeah, it made me just think right now is like I definitely identify as a trench teacher,
Cool.
because a lot of people we do need the tactical training. And something the other day, you know, I made a post. You know, I'm not always the softest when I say things, especially to women. You know, because I mainly work with women. There goes my fingernail. It's okay. We'll put it over there. I mainly work with women, and you know, I get it. I get we are not always responsible for everything that we've gone through, right? Because we don't want to victim blame. There's certain things that were unavoidable of what we've gone through, but we are responsible for our healing. With that being said, I always tell people like I don't believe in, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but I do. Me and my friend have this term. He's in the work as well. I was like, I do believe on putting on my spiritual Timbs. Okay,
Cool.
I'm gonna still put my boots on, and I'm gonna learn to navigate, you know, this plane. And I call that really building the armor of God, or what we call spiritual discernment.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised sometimes when we're deep in our victim, people don't want, they feel like they don't want the discernment, but you do want the discernment because you don't want to have to go through the things that you've gone through before. So,
Yeah.
you know, I tell people it's like, if you were walking through a minefield with no shoes and you got your left foot blown off, if you would have to walk through another minefield, you not want to move in fear and get your other foot gone. So it's like, let's teach you how to put on your boots and navigate walking life's minefields, because there's gonna be more.
Yeah.
So with
God,
that being
that's beautiful though,
Yeah.
because there's a comfort in staying stuck in a place where you're not working with spiritual discernment.
learned helplessness.
Yeah, and it's a questioning or a fearfulness of, nah, it can't be like that. Like, I'm meant to live this way. It's that self-constructed narrative of, but this is all I know. And who the fuck would I be if I took that narrative away and if I began to move with spirit? Because if you really, really think about it, all we are is potentiality at any one point. But we run that narrative of, I am everything that's happened to me. I am my past. But it's like, what you really are is this ever moving, ever flowing, ever growing potentiality that can do anything at any point. And the only thing hindering yourself is your limits on yourself. But you hear that, and even I hear that at times. I'm like, well, to an extent, that doesn't work for this person or that person or this severe trauma over here. It's like we want to make rational excuses for why that potentiality can't exist. And I love the idea of spiritual Timbs. It's fucking badass.
Yeah, you do you want to? Oh, I said we're building the Wu-Tang Clan, but except Wu is WOO, like spiritual Wu. So we're like, yeah, we'll put on our spiritual Timbs and be part of the Wu-Tang Clan.
Cool.
You know, but you brought up a really great point. Is like, yeah, people are often, they've gone through failure, they've gone through things, so they don't believe in the potential. So the failure brings up a lot of learned helplessness, but then also the fear of it happening again brings up, and this is one of my new favorite words, catastrophizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people are catastrophizing, they're living in their learned helplessness. And I agree with you. Like, I always tell people, the spiritual journey is not one size fits all. Everybody's a very individual case. And so, like you're saying, like in certain cases of severe trauma, it's going to take longer. You're going to have to go deeper. You're going to have to use different modalities. You're going to have to use different approaches. But, for some people, you have to figure out where you're starting from, but you're never going to get to, that highest potential if you don't start.
Yeah.
And, there used to be a sign outside of my gym that said, showing up is the hardest part.
Absolutely.
Once you show up, then you can see, get it on and pop it. And again, showing up is showing up again. So I always tell people the way I look at a spiritual journey and what's holding a lot of people back is indecisiveness.
Yeah.
Most people don't trust themselves.
Yeah.
They don't, they're not always the most decisive. So that's, every day is going to be a decision, moment to moment. We never know what's coming. I mean, we can, what's the Outcast song? It says, you can plan a pretty picnic, but you can't predict the weather.
Yeah.
So it's shit like that. It's like, but
Yeah.
if you stay ready, you don't have to get us ready all the time if you have the discernment and if you have the tools.
Yeah.
So you're
Beautifully
asking about
said. Beautifully said.
Yeah, 2017 you're asking about?
Yeah.
What part of it?
I want to know the internal. So the moment for you that gave you the courage to name, like, I need to pivot, or I'm not in alignment, or God is speaking to me.
Okay. First of all, like many people who are getting spiritually awoken, I thought I was crazy. Like there were things coming to me. Like I said, like I feel like God was coming like as a slight whisper, like you should do this. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense because that's not who I know myself to be. I remember I went to art school, so I have an art degree. I was on path of being a commercial photographer, celebrity photographer. I was always behind the camera. Never like what I'm doing now. You couldn't have paid me to do it 15 years ago. I didn't want to. So when I went into sex work, I was still very like personable, one-on-one, very private, very intimate. And so I remember maybe sometime in 2015, 2016, I heard in my head, you need to become a personality. I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I kept hearing, it's like, no, you need to talk. You need to talk. You need to be a personality. So I came up with this like idea. I was like, who would I be? And I came up with the name T Blanco, which is like a part of my alter ego. And so I just simply made a little like pitch deck for myself. It said T Blanco, like real talk, stimulating, addictive, raw. Cool. And I put it in like a little vision board book. And I started.
But didn't put it out anywhere.
Didn't put it out anywhere.
But you had it.
Yeah, and I reached out to this guy who was big in the scene here in Atlanta, who was a personality, and I DM'd him. I was like, "Can you teach me how to be a personality?" And I go back and I'm like, "That's kind of weird that I asked him." He never answered.
Okay.
Blessing in disguise. But I just felt like I needed to start writing and speaking. So I wiped my Instagram. So this is in the height of me like still in sex work and figuring out how I'm going to leave. So, because before I got into sex work, I had no desire to do what I'm doing now. I didn't even know it was a possibility. Didn't know this would be my life. Didn't know this would be my destiny because this is my purpose and my destiny. But what I started doing was wiped my Instagram, started showing up online more intentionally and more purposefully. Because for a long time, I was always a good writer, a good orator, a good speaker, but I didn't think people cared.
Yeah.
Right? So you put something out and you're like, oh, well, nobody's, on it. Or
gets 3 likes.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, nobody cares.
Yeah.
So you're like, let's go back to the basic bitch shit. Let's post selfies. Let's post food. Let's just do like just the basic stuff.
Yeah. And you get 100 likes and people are like, oh, you look good.
Yeah, and so really what happened was like I had gotten married. It was kind of like a 90-day fiance type of deal. It was long distance. But very much, on path to bring him over, start a life and everything. And we started disintegrating. And it was in the height of that disintegration and that uncoupling that spirit started speaking the loudest. So I was, praying, God, like, show me what to do. Like, if that's not my husband, let me know. And it's like, oh, bitch, we're going to let you know. And so what happened was, in the height of my own depression, I was like starting to post motivational things that were for other people, but they were also for me.
Yeah.
Because I felt deeply alone. And I felt like, well, God, if I'm going through this, somebody else has to be going through this. Why can't I talk about this? Because I remember sharing things, and I remember I had a family member be like, why do you have to talk about your divorce? I was like, well, why can you only celebrate my marriage?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I need support. And so
at that time, real quick, like, were you working with anybody in the spiritual realm?
No.
Like, so you didn't have a guru, a healer, a teacher,
Cardi B was my guru.
Okay.
Cardi B, like, so people.
No, it makes sense. It was your guiding North Star of somebody shining their own light in a way that was so beautiful and so authentic that you went, they're fucking doing it.
Well, I tell people all the time, like, people have a tendency to judge consciousness.
Yeah.
And because they feel enlightenment and consciousness looks a certain way, they miss out on a lot of messengers. And for me, when I was, I was a worker, I would sit in my downtime and I was watching Cardi B post motivational, just like really, ratchet, but motivational posts and being very confident. She was like, I'm going to leave the strip club. I'm going to be a rapper. I'm going to do this. So as she was like leaving, I was leaving, and our paths somewhat were very similar of the intentions that we had. So I actually wrote a whole ebook on Cardi B's Guide to Consciousness.
Yep.
Because there's at least 10 things that she could teach you about consciousness and self-esteem, heart, trusting yourself, intuition. So
God, I just gotta stop you real quick because I love what you said, where how many people miss out on messengers because of how it's dressed up or how it looks or really their judgment of it. Whereas, like, man, if you can open your eyes, everyone is a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's that true Christ consciousness, then it's like it's looking at where are the messages, because God's working through everyone, through the homeless individual, through anybody, and the idea of letting go of how you think it should look, because a lot of that's dressed up in a particular puritanism or morality of like it can't involve this or it can't be this because enlightenment's not associated with it. But when you get these figures like Cardi B, they're like, the fuck it can't. Look at who I am, what I embody. But when you pull the teachings from that, they're the same ancient teachings of belief in self, perseverance, manifestation, alignment with self, connection with source and spirit. And it's like, man, it's beautiful. Yeah. Because we need it in all different forms to inspire different people and go, if they're doing it, I can do it. That magic spark that happens.
And we're in a time, I literally started drafting a post about this, 2 days ago. We're living in a time where the traditional it's not that it's failing us, but it's not working fast enough to get to the people that need the medicine. So, when I talk about spiritual Tims and I talk about the Wu-Tang Clan, I'm talking about representation. Because there are people in certain demographics that need representation to get to the medicine. And people are not always trusting of the medicine based on the traditional way in which it works. I have people all the time come to me. There's like, I've dumped my therapist. I want to work with you because my work is a combination of intuitive therapy and also just divination and these, the occult aspect. But people don't always feel safe in the traditional. And I always tell people, because people say, well, if you're a worker or soldier of God, why didn't you go to the church? I said, I could, quite frankly, I could probably tear it up in the pulpit, but that was never my safe space. And it's not a lot of people's safe spaces. And God is beyond the building. God is a people. God is a fellowship. And I tell people all the time, in order sometimes to follow your God-given purpose and gifts, you as the individual have to show up as who you are to build the fellowship. And that's why it does take confidence. It does take a little bit of, and I tell people, because I always look at the duality of things, because people will say, the ego is bad, clout chasing is bad, um, politics are bad. No, like those, there's positives of those things that are all in the good makings of a good leader. And if we don't believe in self, how can we build the fellowship to get the message out to the people? So I do believe we're living in a time where spirit, universe, God is using so many different representatives to get the healing to the people. And yeah, people judge the messenger all the time based
Mm.
on what they're comfortable with. And I do think that sometimes, yes, we have to receive the medicine through people that we feel resonant with and trust in the outside. But there's a saying also that goes, not all skin folk are kinfolk too.
Yeah, yeah,
So you got to be careful with that, because
no doubt.
sometimes, the devil comes in everything you ever wish for or what you're comfortable with. And I tell people, a lot of people miss out. A lot of people miss out on God and good medicine because they judge the vessels and they judge the suit and the representation that spirit has
Damn.
come to bless them in.
Yo, and oh man, you're making me think, Tatiana, like, so I know I hit this point with, I've always been fascinated with the fringes and being the archetype of the trickster and being on just the edge, and my risk taking and sensation seeking when I was younger, but like subcultures, so tattoos, and then certain people would do it for me. Like I went and got tatted in New Orleans, and this dude Paulie had like 6 or 7 sparse gold tooth, and I was like, yo, that's fucking awesome. So I went and got some permanent, and then I started to tattoo myself more, and I felt more like myself. Didn't feel performative. I felt safe in my skin. But it's funny, my buddy David called me, and I just recently did a talk. I got to present on stage with Dr. Shafali, who wrote The Conscious Parent and The Awakened Family. And she made a point to say, like, hey, when this guy came on the Zoom and I came on his podcast, I judged him. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he's interested in my work and what it means to be a conscious parent. But my buddy David called me crying. And he was like, dude, you're doing something that you don't even recognize through representation. To see you up on that stage, how you look. And I know your heart and I know you are, but gave me and so many other people empowerment to go, cool, we can get there too. And what I think is interesting is you talk about, but everybody's got it. So I could have a particular aesthetic and think that if I'm just looking at the vessel, then I can be the guy who I go up to the gas station. I'm judging the guy in the 3-piece suit with the fucking BMW because I'm making all these ideas in my head about who he is just by looking at the external image. And then I think about that Dead Prez song where they say, can't tell by no tattoo, can't tell by no handshake. It starts with the heart. And you got to know how to read people's hearts. And that can become incredibly challenging when we have broken, I don't even like to use the word broken, but really damaged individuals that are out of alignment with themselves and causing themselves a lot of hurt and can cause others a lot of hurt, and nobody's immune to it. Like I think, oh, I can read anybody and I'll know who I'll align with and who I won't, but it really takes constant spiritual discernment, constant checking in with source energy and with yourself. Do I need to stay in relationship with this person? Does this person need to be in my crew? And what makes the most sense? So did all of this just start to hit you in these different times, and you're just flowing with it? But you had to.
I started meeting a few messengers.
Okay.
Spirit started sending me messengers of people who were like, "Hey, look at these cards," or "Hey, look at these orbs," or "Look at." And one of the ways that I tell people that I got inspired to go back to these practices was actually spirit like sent messengers to piss me off, because one of my greatest fuels is sacred rage. And so I would get sent these messengers that would like befriend me, like, hey, let me teach you something. But then, like that trickster energy you're talking about, where spirit would test my own consciousness of people's hearts and people's intentions. So the intentions might not have been always pure, but they were activators. They were still catalysts to push my interest towards returning to certain modalities that would become my niche, and also some of the things, the tools that I use best in order to serve people. So, heart, like you said, heart is something that I launched my practice on. I'm a heart, before anything, I'm a heart-led leader. I'm intellectual, but I feel that people are more likely to open their mind to you if you could access their heart space.
Truth.
But if you cannot get somebody to understand a thought, they will not open their heart.
Yeah.
So when I was, getting, these downloads and things were coming to me, I was like, I just want to be a heart that understands. More than anything, I want to be a heart that understands, a safe heart, a brave heart, many different things. And so,
shout out to Braveheart.
Shout out to Braveheart.
Wasn't he one of the Care Bears?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Mel Gibson for a second. But we can be both, right? Duality.
Braveheart was the old lion. He's like the elderly of the Care Bears. And come on, the Care Bears, dude. How cool was that?
I watched
they were just beams of light
I watched the Care Bears video, like the movie, on repeat for like 2 whole summers.
Really? Cool, man. Braveheart. But all these, and what you just said, if you can't access someone's heart, if they can't feel you, typically they begin to shut down. Or compartmentalize or pivot away from. And
even for myself, for those who don't, they would not know, but I am an ordained priest in the religion of Santeria, and I went through a year-long initiation. That was probably like near the last time I saw you. I went through a 1-year religious initiation where it was like a pilgrimage. I had to give up certain things for a year. I had to wear white for a year.
I think that was 2018, 2019. And that was when I was in private practice and you came out. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember you were in all white and you were just at the tail end of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave up my normal life for a year to make that sacrifice of that, that dedication to shifting my life into the practice. But after that, I feel like for a little while, I got a little, I tell people I got a little insincere with myself. I just came to this realization the other day. I was starting to have nightmares about it and I had to break them down where, again, because I think sometimes we look at what enlightenment should look like or be, we can start to create an insincerity. And I felt like I was like, I'm becoming a little bit of a hypocrite because I was judging a huge part of my shadow self, which is actually very much who I am. And, I tell people all the time, we have our shadow side and we often have to send it away to rehab to get its, work done that needs to get done. And then it reintegrates. But it was just recently that I said to myself, I was like, there's been parts of myself that I've missed, but because now we've started climbing the spiritual teacher guru ladder, we can't present that way. And one of the things that I was like, I don't want to have to code switch all the time. It's one thing to be able to turn it on and off.
Yes.
But there's so many of us that don't feel safe in teaching that's like, why can't I just talk how I fucking talk?
Yeah.
When I'm with a friend, and again, knowing the time, the place, and the space.
And there's a difference between maneuvering and being switching so intensely that you start to misalign in yourself. And then it becomes performative on every level because you're just performing in different environments. Where can you be your authentic self? And again, because I recognize that all the time as a professor when I teach at a university, I'm going to present in a certain way, but I'm still Wes. As a therapist, as a psychologist, in one-on-one sessions or in working with families and parents, I'm going to present a particular way, but I'm still Wes. When I'm working with a young kid, I'm still Wes. And it's like, if you don't have that, but I'm still embedded in, then it starts to become out of alignment with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like so many people I meet, they feel unworthy to fulfill their purpose because they have a certain idea of what it should look like, what it should sound like. And of course, you still want to be responsible.
Right.
Because, in the past few years, the spiritual industry especially has exploded. Now we're looking at $1 billion industry. And now, people are pivoting into it, and capitalism, there's money to be made. A lot of people are just saying, I can do what I want because this is who I am. But there's also a certain level of accountability because, again, right, when you are moving in alignment with living spirit-led, not just heart-led, not just passion-led, but spirit-led, there's still discipline that's required, because if you're just going to live by your ego, don't say you're living in alignment with spirit. So I call out. I wouldn't say I disrupt. Let's say I disrupt.
Yes.
I disrupt. I'm a disruptor.
A disruptor.
I'm a disruptor.
Yep.
So I also told someone the other day, I posted about this. I said, I don't consider myself woke. I do not like the term woke. I'm just come look at this shit, bitch. Do you see this shit? Come look at this shit.
Who likes the term woke?
Especially now it's been corrupted.
It got certain pop psychology terms have been so used. It's like a song that you hear repeatedly that it loses its initial thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear manifestation now, mindfulness, mind, body, these things have become co-opted, abused, and overused, so they lose their essence. And it's like we almost have to create a new verbiage, a new language. But I love that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of spiritual abuse. Yeah. I mean, there's abuse going on in every community,
in every field, everywhere.
But that's something that I've kind of I wouldn't say I've been a disruptor in the spiritual community, because I will call it out on all sides, and because I am biracial, I am allowed to go into different spaces, and I'm definitely a shapeshifter. So whether I go into this space or that space, I may, do you see this shit, bitch? You know what I mean? Because I'm just like, that's not right. Do you think that's right? So again, sometimes people are like, is it wrong if I'm living, my authentic self? It's like, did you check in and make sure that you're being accountable?
Right.
That it's like, yes, you can be your authentic self, but there's still personal responsibility, because we are living in the collective consciousness.
Yes.
We also do have a responsibility to our fellow brother, sister persons. Because it's not just about us. And, there's a lot of people who say, you're not the main character in your story. I would like to think, yes, I am still, because it's still an individual journey.
Well, who on earth is living their life where they're not? Like, can you really even do that?
No.
I would almost argue, like, ontologically, from existence standpoint, that you can't be a human and not be the main character. You can think about others, but you're in this vessel looking out. It already makes you the main character. And I think when people say that, they mean more of like, is everything circulating around you? And I think there's a way to be the main character and still be involved in tribal connection, community, co-creating your existence with others. It's that locus of control. You float in the middle because there's the external and the internal, but they both are interplaying all the time.
Yeah, I'm an Aquarius with a Leo rising, a Libra moon, and I always tell people, like, for my big three, I always feel like I'm torn between my pride and the people. But again, that's also one of my strong points, because I am a person that can teach people about living authentically as an individual, but where does that fall into your purpose and your power in the collective consciousness? Because Aquarius is the house of organization, social groups, hopes and dreams of the collective, and Leo's very self. So there's a balance, right? And that's why I even tell people all the time. It was so funny. You remember when I brought my mom up here?
Oh yeah.
I told her that
was at my old office in Clinton Street.
Yes. Yeah. I told my mom I was coming to film the podcast, and she's like, "Oh, the one that you I reprimanded her that day because she was God bless my mom. She's an Aries all. She's got a lot of Aries energy, but she was dominating the conversation when I came to meet you.
And I was totally letting it ride, because I'm like, I'm like, my homie felt sacred enough to bring their mother.
Yes.
That's maternal energy in the room. This is the mom of somebody I respect greatly. So I'm like, I'm not going to shut this down at all.
I shut it down.
Yeah.
because I'm teaching her boundaries. And I said to her, I said, you didn't get in trouble, but I'm teaching you a lesson on alpha and beta. Every individual has alpha and beta energy, right?
Absolutely.
We can all be the alpha. We can all have our dominant traits. But I said, sometimes you got to be beta and let another person shine. And I said, in that moment, when I came to meet Mr. West, you were dominating a scenario that was not about you. So I said, if I brought you to bring Oprah and I'm the one who's meeting Oprah, are you going to dominate? So I was like, you got to learn. So again, right, even in life, as we're getting along with the collective consciousness and we're finding our relationships, it's all a dance.
Yes.
Again, right? It's intuition, because having intuition allows you to dance.
Yep.
And some dances are going to have hard steps. Some of them are going to be a flow, and just knowing what kind of dance you're dealing with. It's one thing if let's say we're on a panel together. It's even like right now we're sitting here,
Yeah.
we're dancing.
Yep, absolutely.
It's a social awareness,
right?
And engagement, intimacy, and we
A
flow off
call
of
and
each other.
response, but it's an attunement to one another.
Yes.
Yep, and that you can feel, and you can feel when that's not violent.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, I feel it all the time. I seldom have people like I bring on a live that I'm like, we did not have chemistry. And last year I brought someone, I was like, I will never do it again because you can feel it.
Yeah.
Right? You can feel it. So.
So you're making me think, Tatiana, like I'm grateful to be doing this in real time because I think a lot about, so, I was immersed in that PhD program, and it's beautiful because it was looking at humanistic, critical, and transpersonal psychologies. And I've always been attuned with spirit and psycho-spiritual work. But if you look at our culture, everything is compartmentalized. So you get neurologists, immunologists, biochemists, psychologists, psychiatrists, sociologists, anthropologists, and they're all separate. And they may come together every now and then and have a multidisciplinary team meeting where they talk and share. But there's a woman that I love, Nora Bateson, and her father is Gregory Bateson, and they did work on radical systems theories. And one of Nora Bateson's terms is transcontextuality. And it was the idea of bringing all different fields together because they didn't even really see them as separate. They said, we've done that to life. We've taken life force energy and we've acted like anthropology was a thing. It's our one lens to look at something and study it and examine it culturally, sociology, the biochemical. And so to sit with you as a spiritual practitioner, as a psycho-spiritual healer, as a, hold on, give me the double M one, as a,
as a motivational maven.
Yes, as a motivational maven, I want to talk a little bit about the industry of psychology and psychiatry because I love being a therapist. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I love being a psychologist. I love having my PhD, but I'm very, very upset and disturbed by big business industry and psychology and psychiatry and what they're doing. And so I've started to talk to these really rogue figures like Dr. Bruce Levine, who wrote a beautiful book, and he's critiquing all of psychiatry and psychology. And he's a practitioner, he's a psychologist, but he's like, really just deconstructing it and trying to disrupt it. Dr. Lucy Johnstone, and she's done some brilliant work. And then Dr. Joanna Moncrief, who recently wrote a book about looking at biochemistry and depression and psychiatric medication and how all of those studies are not necessarily very valid, showing that low levels of serotonin or dopamine are the cause solely. So I'm curious. I know this is a long fucking.
No,
it's like,
I'm
where are you
listening.
going with this, Wes? But I think what I want to understand from you is how you see psychology in your work, because I think it's so important for people to hear who want to do spiritual work, because I love the practitioners that are holistic. So I love the therapists that you go to where they're like, this is a sacred space and your spirit is in this room as well. And we're doing soul nursing. And I love the spiritual practitioners that say, look, I'm not a therapist, but we are working on your psychology, your cognitive narrative, your emotions, your relationship with intuitive felt sense. So I'm curious about that. Like, as you maneuver your spiritual growth, where does psychology come into play and how do you view the field? I know there's a lot.
So I feel like the field has its place, right? Because it gives us that structure, right? It gives us a lot of structure that we need. But sometimes I think people don't recognize that there's certain things people experience that are not just a disorder, it's something spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Like depression is not always a disorder, narcissism is not always a disorder. Like there's spiritual things that happen that allow these things. I had a client the other day, and she has a dissociative disorder, and a lot of, let's say, a lot of the work I do, for example, right? My grandfather was a clinical hypnotist, and it's something that I'm interested in. The only thing is, as I've started to explore getting taught in that modality, I kind of realize some of the work I already do is that,
Yeah.
but on a conscious level.
Yeah.
Because when I do divination with people, I am asking their spirit guides and also my guides to give me access to their subconscious. And if there's anything that is in there that they want them to be made aware of that is hindering them, holding them back, causing disruption, please bring it to the surface and let's address it. And so sometimes I bring things up for people and they're like, I haven't thought about that since I was 7.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about that since I was 5. Oh my God. I didn't. So sometimes you need to just spark someone's subconscious mind and bring it to the surface, and therefore that we're able to unpack it, because I think it's a powerful thing to be able to unpack something consciously with somebody and take it a step at a time and create an action plan so you're able to make it stick.
Absolutely.
And they're also taking the responsibility on with you to help make that plan. So I feel like tons of things coincide, and it's going back to this client that I had the other day. I tell people all the time, I am not a certified therapist. I'm a spiritualist, not a psychologist. But there are certain things that I know coincide with somebody developing sometimes a disorder. And so she was somebody who was dealing, with split, characters.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, some of the things that came up was that she was tapped in as a kid. She was prophetic. She was so many things as a kid that were shut down.
Yeah.
That were not made safe. And there were certain things she had gone through. And I said to her, in a few years, you could literally be sitting here doing this work that I'm doing. But so many times, because someone's true spirit and essence has either been traumatized, corrupted, like I was that kid.
Right.
Like I saw spirits, did not know who to talk to about it. My mom just recently told me, she was like, oh yeah, you used to talk about the shadow people all the time in the house. And I was like, oh, so you're telling me this now? She didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it. Terrifying. You shut it down.
And in this culture, if you take any of that
Yeah.
and you bring it with fear and anxiety
Yeah.
to an overly pathologizing, medicalized system,
Yeah.
they will make it a disorder.
Yes.
And they will put you on a functional track into, let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
Let's eradicate it. And let's figure out a way. And it's like, how many people are experiencing massive internal distress and having some type of spirit realm, spirit world interaction, and they don't know what to do with it. So they're just trying to understand it, and how few, that's where I still hate that there's such a divide with psychology and the spirit realm, because it's like, okay, I can either take this dissociative identity experience that I'm having with multiple selves that are showing up that's I'm confused about, and I can go to this arena and it'll be treated in this way, or I can go to this arena and it'll be treated in this way. That's where I'm waiting for that marriage. I'm waiting for
it's happening.
Integration.
It's happening. It's happening. I never thought we'd be living in a time where so many people have so many modalities in their toolbox, right? And I'm seeing a lot of people leaving traditional medicine and going into holistic. It's not that they don't have the traditional accreditations, but they're saying, I want to be able to serve in a more authentic way to myself as a human being, but also in a more authentic way that feels resonant to people, because people don't feel necessarily, again, safe in certain traditional settings. And like you said before, like tons of people are dealing with things, and if they're going to take it to a traditional system, they're either going to medicate the fuck out of them, or they're going to call it something that, quite frankly, yes, it could be that term, but it could also be something that's very special about them in a spiritual way. Like, I am neurodivergent as hell. I have not gone yet to figure out what my neurodivergents are. I would like to this year, because as I've become more spiritually awakened, they've intensified. But again, if you are somebody who is tapped in spiritually, these are gifts, but they can feel like burdens if you don't know how to deal with them. I'm very high sensory. I'm high sensory. you know, very aware, but so much to the point where it can be disruptive in my everyday life. So
Yeah.
I have to learn to cope with it. But when it comes, for example, you know, high sensory in the gym can be a burden, but high sensory when I'm sitting in between you and I'm aware and
Yeah.
I'm cognizant and I'm audient. It's a blessing. So
Yeah.
it's knowing how to manage these things
And
so that
leverage
you're
it.
functional.
Oh, and Tatiana, man, you're making me think about so much. So I think it's beautiful because how do we get people? I'm very invested in empowering people, no matter what they're maneuvering, whether it be neurodivergence, autism, dissociative challenges, um, OCD, whatever we want to name it and label it. If you can learn about it enough and understand yourself on a holistic level, it can become a massive strength. However, we live in this capitalistic society that wants people to be cogs in a machine. So
Mhm.
everything becomes, is it going to be efficient and allow you to be a functional member of society in the way that we think you need to be? Or is it going to be disruptive? And so much of psychology becomes a way to normalize behavior and behaviorally condition people to function in a particular way. And I think we're seeing droves of young people wanting to challenge that and wanting to challenge the systems in play. And I love what's happening, you know, even though it's a very challenging time and we're watching it polarize a lot of people, I really like what youth are doing with gender because it's just opening portals. It's just opening doors of asking questions. What is gender? How do we define it? How are we going to look at it? How is it different than sexual orientation? What are the potentialities of it? How does it move? How does it grow? I'm very interested in human beings and their potentiality.
Mhm.
I'm not very interested in shutting doors and labeling and making people stagnant because I don't think that they're necessarily, we're not stagnant entities. We move and we grow. But when you talk about neurodivergence and you wanting to go learn more about that, the challenge becomes again, what specialist, what platform? Because if you go to a clinical neuropsychologist that's going to run a particular assessment to look at your neurodivergence, unless it's a really holistic one, who I know several, shout out to Dr. Damon Livingston, who's fucking awesome and he rocks stuff holistically. Most of them are going to go, and look at it through this lens. And so, how do we maybe begin to have these practitioners all meet together and develop a holistic assessment that has the emotional, the sensory, the psychological, the spiritual, the interpersonal, a true, robust, holistic, ecological, advanced system to be able to show us in all of our glory and who we are, and all through the lens of empowerment. And we can look at challenges and deficits, but like you said, knowledge of self is the most important thing. And when you have the beautiful way that you conceptualize yourself, where you're like, look, I have this relationship with sensory, and in this particular environment, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a deficit. It's going to be something that I'm really going to have to work on. In this environment, I'll run fucking circles around these people, and so that's where I get really passionate because everything we're telling youth in psychology is a deficit. If you have ADD, if you have bipolar, if you have addiction, it's a deficit. Here's why you are doomed to fail. Here's where it's going to fuck up everything. But a new narrative is being formed. And as we awaken in certain ways and have more consciousness expansion, you're seeing new narratives about ADD. It's a superpower. And what can we do with it and how can you utilize it? So I just think it's, you know, I constantly come back to that one quote that says the most powerful force in the human psyche is how we describe ourselves to ourselves. And so that narrative is what I'm very interested in because the people, the healthiest people I've met, have a very strong sense of self and they don't see themselves as broken or damaged or mentally ill. Whatever challenges they're going through, they see it as spiritual attunement or an opportunity to level up and to grow and as part of their evolution. Yeah.
I love what you brought up because you're correct. Like so many people look in the industry look at things as a deficit. Like why can't why can't you be a leader and functional and be dealing with this toolbox full of different ways that you learn or your body processes things and still succeed? It's it's really challenging, and one of the things that I make people very aware of because I'm very much an empath, right? And I would meet so many people that identify as, empaths, and they're like scary. And I'll say it like this is like, did you ever watch Mean Girls?
Yeah, yeah. Who was in it? Who was Lindsay
Lindsay
Lohan? Yeah,
Lohan.
yeah.
So there was a guy in there, he's like, I'm too gay to function. And I was like, so when I first started on the journey, someone asked me about empaths, and they're like, well, what do you feel about it? I was like, I feel like a lot of people use it as a crutch. I think a lot of people are like, I'm too much of an empath to
Right.
function. And I got villainized a little bit before it. Like I had a few people that were like, oh, "This bitch," like,
Yeah.
and a few years later, I made another video, and I was like, I actually still stand on that though, and why I stand on it is because empaths were not put in this world to go and hide in the fucking corner and be so scary that they can't go outside and they can't do anything. We are here to be some of the best soldiers,
Right.
the best advocates, the best leaders. But how can you do that if you will not expose yourself to certain triggers in order
Yes.
to build, like, what do they say? Like, there's a part of the brain, I can't remember what it's called, but what happens is if you're not exposing it to certain things, you're always going to be scary.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for me, and I hate this. I really wish, can we rewrite this in the psychology book? I hate that the term dark empath has been used for something so negative, because
Yeah.
for me, I'm like, I find that I'm an empath that can navigate the dark. So I was like, oh, that's already been taken, so I can't use dark empath. But I tell people all the time, because even with certain spiritualists, they'll be like, I can't watch scary movies. I can't do horror. I was like, I constantly expose my brain to more things that scare me, that terrify me, and I do my best to build, I call it building my palate.
Cool.
Because if God is sending me people who have gone through such terrible things, such darkness, how can I better serve them if I can't, if me myself can't even expose and I'm scary? So
Yeah.
there's times where I love going to I like haunted places. I like
Yeah, yeah,
historical
yeah.
places. And I remember, I think it was July 2021, I went to South Carolina and I did a lot of haunted things. And people were like, oh my God, I can feel the energy through the videos. It's so dark. It's so heavy. Do you feel so drained? I was like, bitch, I'm charged up. I came back charged up. And
Yeah.
they're like, what? And I'm like, I really think that as I'm building my palate and I'm building my resistance and my tolerance,
Yeah.
I am better able to navigate those things. I used to be terrified to go travel by myself.
Yeah.
You have people who are meant to be leaders that are dealing with the sensory things and all these things, and they're like, I'm terrified to drive to the airport. I'm tired. I can't go through Chelsea. I can't rent a car. It's like, but you're not supposed to be living in a way that you're being held back.
Yeah.
And
And it's that narrative of self.
Mhm.
And so they're telling themselves, because I'm this empath or because I have this sensitive relationship with this thing,
Mhm.
I need to avoid it. And what I think you're doing in a very blunt, direct way is calling them out to their greatest good
Mhm.
and being like, you're not meant for that. You're meant to do much more.
Mhm.
We need the introverts. We need the empaths. We need those that have that unique to challenge themselves and come in, and then we need the extroverts and these other people to challenge themselves. Whatever is the most difficult for you is where your work lies, and we need everyone to do that work. And when you talk about the spirit stuff, it's interesting because like I'm kind of like you. I become fascinated by it. So nothing, and I don't mean to sound pompous when I say this, but I don't feel scared of of darkness or the spirit realm and certain aspects. So you could put me like in an old abandoned asylum, and I think out of curiosity, I could stay the night there to be with those souls in pain and to be with those who were abused and neglected and like those spirits and those spirit realms, but I feel like the light will always shine, and it's the paradoxical nature of like if you bring fear to it, you feed it. But if you can bring a curiosity and a lightness to it, then nothing's more powerful than light energy. You know?
Absolutely. You know, and I like I tell people I don't consider myself, I don't label myself a light worker. I am a light
Yeah.
worker, but I identify with shadow worker, more a middle
Cool.
ground worker. Going back to, you know, like I don't know if it's in the Bible or not, but I remember this quote that says, not all disciples can be apostles, but all apostles can be disciples.
Cool.
So for me, you know, as a shadow worker, to me, all shadow workers can be light workers, but not all light workers can be shadow workers.
Got you. Who's the guy? His name's maybe Dixon.
Okay.
Black dude, always wears a suit. He's got a Masonic chain. He's all over TikTok, but he does a beautiful breakdown of the light workers, the healers, and when he talks about the shadow workers, that's probably where I align the most. And he says the shadow workers come in, you don't even know who they are. They come in all shapes and sizes, but they don't mind being in the pain. They don't mind rolling up their sleeves and sitting in pain and sadness and not needing to run away from it. And I feel like that's where I've always aligned as a therapist, has been like holding sacred space for somebody that's going through a lot of darkness and pain and not necessarily needing to grab their hand and try and pull them away from it, but just sit with them in it. I think there's beautiful work to be done there. And I probably couldn't call myself a light worker just because it's fucking played out. Now when people say love and light, I'm like, oh God, please shut up.
You know,
it's repetition. It's just,
and there's a lot of spiritual bypassing in that love and
yes,
light. You know, there's people who are just like, you know, I'm all about the taboo. I'm all about the taboo. I'm all about the things that are, you know, stigmatized, demonized. I like talking about all those things. And even, you know, for me, like with the direction of which my work is going, like recently, I love taking like cultural references or like media references.
You're brilliant with that.
Thank you. Yeah, because, you know, and even at times art, you know, art imitates life. And so recently I did a deep dive. There's a couple right now that are constantly going viral for being very dysfunctional, very toxic, and you know, they both have trauma, especially the young woman in the relationship. And so a lot of people were telling me about their show that came out on the Zeus network, and they're like, I couldn't make it past the second episode. I was like, there's my cue. That sounds like a challenge. That sounds like a challenge. So I watched 7 hours of them. It was a lot, but I said this is going to be an observational study, and because there's a reason why they're going viral right now. And you know, some people are conspiracists. They're like, you know, they're crisis actors. Regardless if they're crisis actors or not, there's a reason why this narrative.
Jeff Bezos created them and put them there in order to take the light off of
It's
Amazon.
Rock Nation's fault. You know, regardless, there's a reason why they're being pumped into the collective so heavily right now, and what can we learn from them?
Yeah.
So,
man, that's a beautiful way to enter into that. Is like, regardless, they are being pumped into the collective.
Why are we seeing them every day?
Right.
Why are they going viral?
Let me go figure this out. Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, I did a divination, and I asked Spirit, what is it that you want me to, like, highlight from these 7 hours of these people that I watched? And they were like, that how sometimes we express love, how it's been misconstrued, and how it's avoidant of certain conversations that really need to be had about what love is not and what's trauma. And so I pulled together about 12 different clips from the 7 hours, right, and condensed it to 10 minutes, and like just pointed certain things out. And I said, you know, and this is how I talk to women, like, and this goes back to me being sincere. Like, I love women's empowerment. People are like, don't call women bitches. This is how I talk. I'm gonna be like, what do bitches need to know? It's like, you do that shit. You saw what that girl did for 7 hours. Here's 10 minutes of what so many women that I meet and work with also do. This girl is an extreme case of what so many average women are still dealing with within themselves. You know, love bombing, codependency, thinking that marriage and pregnancy is the be all end all, and that life is going to be like so many different points. And, you know, just her being completely in an infatuation and making this guy her God, you know, and lack of self. And he's abusive too, don't get me wrong. But one of the things I highlighted was one of the best things he ever said to her, regardless of them being in this abusive relationship, he said, you need to go find yourself. And I said, out of 7 hours, that's the most powerful thing he said.
Yeah, yeah.
Because he's cognizant and aware that she does not know herself.
Yeah.
Even if he does take advantage of that.
And like you said, how many times do we do that as human beings? Talking about these women, but I think men do it. And there's a quote that says, "It is impossible to love or hate anything about another human being without it mirroring something you love or hate about yourself."
Mm-hmm.
But so many times we will look at it and we will nail somebody to a cross and go, "Look at that disgusting, horrific behavior." And it really does take a willingness to say, wait a minute, why am I so triggered by this? Why am I so emotionally reactionary? Oh shit, I think it's because it's showing a part of my shadow, or it's holding up a mirror to aspects of myself that I've lived out before. And that's why I don't want to repeat. But we want to put it on somebody else. We want to project it upon somebody else instead of looking at ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It was a little risky of a post for me to do, but I'm getting more comfortable with those. And
well, talk about that. That's how I want us to kind of like wrap, because
we'll talk all day long.
Yeah. I'll go forever. Mm-hmm. That was lame. That was my lame Outcast reference. I want you to talk about currently where people can find you on social media, your current intentions with your posts, the work that you're doing right now, how people can get a hold of you, and then your plans for your future work and where you're putting your energy. I'd love for you to kind of lay that out.
Okay. I post the most frequently on Instagram, and you can find me under The Trap Witch. Just to let you know, there is currently a lot of people in the spiritual community are getting their pages duplicated. So if you do follow me, be prepared to have at least 10 fake pages follow you.
I've had several pop up, and I'm like, oh,
it's not me.
Tatiana did that, and then I go look, and I'm like, you can very easily tell who the fake pages are because they don't have close to 200,000 followers, and your page does.
Yeah.
So any of the fake pages are like 1,300, 1,200, 1,500, but it's like, yo, if it's you and you've been on a battle trying to get yourself authenticated with Instagram.
Yeah, they won't verify me as of yet, but
it'll happen.
Yeah. I'm not concerned also doing the cleanup work of letting people always know that it's not me, because that's also a spiritual test for people of their own personal discernment.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm on Instagram, The Trap Witch. I have a website, www.thetrapwitch.com. As far as the direction of where I'm going, I'm really heading into more courses, public events again, features, more mass. So my astrologer held me accountable to saying that, in this coming year, and always I can do both. I can be a very deep intellectual, or I could be more, appealing to the culture. And I'm at that place where now I've done a lot of the deep dives of the things that I'm really interested in my work, and I want to make them more digestible to the masses, because the masses need it right now. So I'm in a place where my teachings don't have to be over intellectually. I just want to speak to the language of the culture and the people, and the things that are also influencing our kids and our culture, and really helping the people who also form and shape that. So the past year or 2 years, I've really had an influx of like celebrities who started following me that are leading our music and our film, and I'm actually looking to get back in the arts again and be behind the scenes, and influencing some of the medicine going out through our art. So
beautiful.
Really looking to bridge like who I was before spirit pulled me to this calling, and fusing it with some of the things that I'm still passionate about.
Awesome. And I was thinking back when you've done some brilliant ebooks, some courses. My sister took one of your courses that was awesome about femininity. I can't remember the name.
Oh, probably the darkness, darkness, divinity of sisterhood, probably.
Yes, I think it was that one. But you've done several of those, and so you'll be posting about the new ones that you're doing, and how you're rolling them out.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking to start my own podcast very soon.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, just to let you know, in order to come on your podcast, I charge $1 million.
Okay. That's a little low for you.
Yeah. Yo, I'm grateful, Tatiana, and this to me is like an ongoing. You're a colleague, you're a friend, but you are somebody that I feel like is always dropping knowledge, and you're invested and very authentic in what you do and how you do it. So for you to make it out here and us spend this time, it's an honor, and I'm grateful to have had you on.
Likewise, thank you.
Cool.